Now, Portfolio Committee member Brendan Pillay joins us now to just unpack where we are with this whole discussion. Great to have you. Thanks very much for your time, Brendan.
Good morning, Leanne, and thank you very much.
All right, so public process is done, as I say. There's a back and forth process between the Parliament and the DHA. Where are we now? Just give us an update.
So we completed our process of public participation through the public hearings. And then the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs had to then deliberate. And I think it was quite a lengthy task and tedious in that we had to unpack all of the submissions made, both written submissions and oral submissions. So the Portfolio Committee has then deliberated. We discussed items related to the amendments. We had presentations from legal, we had presentations from the Department of Home Affairs, we had presentations from the IEC, and all of the stakeholders that directly would be involved in this bill. And we are now at the point of where we've somehow finalized on much of the deliberations. And we are actually going to now present or compile an A-list that needs to be submitted to committee. Yeah.
So we'll constantly remind viewers of what the change is, and really the crux of the matter now is how to accommodate independent candidates, and this is where we are at. And I imagine it's quite a complex issue. I mean, some of the things where we talk about the concern is what it takes in terms of a threshold for an independent candidate, the seat allocations. How complex is this process, and where are we at determining that?
Yeah, Leanne, I think we've come under criticism to say that we were not able to complete this process. But just as you've said and quite correctly pointed out, it's quite a complex situation that needs to be unpacked. And we have to ensure that everything that we do in respect of the amendments of this bill is going to directly respond to the court judgment. But again, that is a fair process in that we make the entire participation in elections fair for both independent candidates and political parties. So you're quite correct. There's quite a few things that had to be put into it. For example, the requirements for an independent to contest the general elections and what it takes to actually meet those requirements. But I can unpack that if the need be.
Please do. We'd like to just get an idea of what it is.
So currently, in our current form, the electoral system, we have political parties that contest the elections, and political parties are requested to pay a deposit in order to contest the elections. And when one pays that deposit, if you attain or achieve or get a seat, then you obviously get that deposit refunded. So for independents to contest the election, there's going to be a need for them to also pay a deposit, an electoral deposit. However, we have established as the committee, and I think it's quite clear, that it won't be expected that they would be paying the same kind of deposit, but that has been left to the IEC to decide. And obviously, because the deposit may change from time to time based on the economic situation of the country. So we said that they would then be able to put that into the Electoral Act. But again, there has to be, for any independent candidate, individual, to show cause or interest to be able to contest the space of a general election, you have to show that you have some kind of support. And the discussions and deliberations that unfolded in the committee is that you should have at least a quota of 50% of the previous seat, signatures to that amount, to be able to show support before you're able to contest the space.
Also, in terms of a cooling off period, I just want to understand that as well, because that was something that was spoken about. Is the cooling off period of 3 months that's put there, is say somebody is part of a political party, they decide to leave it and become an independent candidate, do they need to be alone for 3 months in order to contest? Is that the idea of the cooling off period?
So I think there's various things that you have to consider when one looks at a cooling off period. And I want to first use the scenario of the circular world. If one is in a particular environment or sector of work, And when you leave, there's a clause that most companies have, that you can't enter the same space within a period of so much of time. So if you are in a particular environment, for example, media perhaps, and then you have to join another media company, there might be a certain clause, and you come across that. But for us, the cooling off period was to say that it avoids those persons who may, at the last minute, decide that they want to now contest elections because they've not been selected by the political parties, but also it gives the IEC time to verify the signatures that are going to be presented. So the 3 months is actually going to give time for the verification processes, the requirements that are met, and to also be able to vet the candidates before the elections.
Okay. There has been criticism towards Parliament because there's been talk that that Parliament's been wanting to squeeze out independent candidates in favour of political parties, and all of this in terms of seat allocators and quotas that are there, and whether a candidate can only be voted in one province or can contest only in one province or in more than one region. So talk to us about this and that view that Parliament is really trying to hamper the independent candidate.
I must disagree with Parliament having to hamper independence, Leanne. To be quite honest, firstly, it has been clearly outlined that you could be able to contest the elections if you are a registered voter anywhere in South Africa. But I think where it comes down to the specifics, and I think, like you were saying, it's quite complex. An independent candidate is one person. If you had to contest this election, and let's say for argument's sake, you contest in all regions of the country, how are you going to occupy more than one seat if you achieve enough votes to actually get a seat? So I think that is where the complexity is, trying to unpack how is that going to be addressed. Because in actual fact, an independent candidate is one person, so you're only going to occupy one seat. So what we have decided to do is to defer that discussion to our next meeting, where we were going to get a further presentation in terms of looking at how you may want to rank your order of preference. So if you're contesting 5 regions or all regions, you will then rank the order of preference in the region that you would want to then occupy a seat. And that would be the seat. But also bear in mind that you have to reach the quota, the number of votes for a seat in any particular legislature or the NA.
I know that yesterday was sort of unpacking the bill clause by clause, having a look at it in absolute detail. And I mean, there's a lot of confusing things coming out of it that I don't necessarily understand. And I think closer to the time, we'll start unpacking the definitions of all of these things, like the droop formula and the 3-stage system. I'm not going to ask you to explain that right now. But what I am going to ask you is how far are we from completing this bill? And the golden question, are you going to meet the deadline of December?
Absolutely. We're definitely going to. In fact, Parliament is currently in recess, which is your constituency period. But the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs made an application to Parliament for us to sit. And we've been actually sitting every week from the start of recess to be able to finalize. And I must say that we are in an advanced stage. Like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of this interview, we are now at the A list. And A list is saying specifics, details, the exact changes that need to be made on the bill. So that's going to be then recorded and then going to be presented. Now, also remember that this will be sent to the NCOP, and if they choose not to make any changes, then it will be sent to the president to then finalize. But if they do, then they might open a process for public participation further. Yeah. However, we won't preempt. Our part as the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs is almost complete. In fact, we have this A list and then we're done.
What is the top of the A list? I mean, what is the biggest sticking point at this point?
You know, you can't say there's any sticking point because, like you said, we went through clause by clause. And I must say that I must commend the committee. In fact, all political parties were able to reach consensus, irrespective of having, at some point differing views and representing different political parties. But the level of maturity shows that there is also a high level of democracy that prevails within the committee, in that we were able to reach in almost all items consensus.
Good. Well, final question, the IEC, are they going to have enough time to do what they need to do ahead of the elections in 2024?
I can't answer for the IEC as they are Chapter 9 institution, but I'm confident that yes, they are. Given the circumstances that they were placed in during the last local government elections, having to have planned and executed an election in a short space of time, under the severe conditions of COVID and lockdown, they were still able to deliver a democratic election. And I think I'm actually confident that they'll be able to complete this and be able to deliver a free and fair election.
All right, let's leave it there. Brendan, thank you very, very much for talking to us. Of course, Portfolio Committee member Brandon Pillay discussing progress in the amendment of the electoral system process as the December Concourt deadline to amend the electoral system inches ever closer.